In this video, I'll show you how to approach cardio so it actually feels doable and sustainable. Here's the shift. We're going from focusing on output to focusing on input. So for cardio, what this means is typically when people get on a machine, they have all these numbers staring at them. Things like speed, pace, distance, calories, watts, or resistance level. And it's very easy to start chasing those numbers, to use them as some kind of measuring stick, and then also to miss hitting those target numbers that we set out to hit, which can leave us feeling like a failure or like the workout was just like a total waste of time. Or maybe we do hit the targets, but we do it in a way that feels demoralizing and that leaves us feeling exhausted and discouraged, or that makes doing cardio later in the week feel too intimidating, like too much stress to have to handle, just too fatiguing. Smartwatches can create a similar trap. So people will go out for a run or a hike and they might use their watch to target certain metrics similar to a cardio machine. But then it'll be really hot out, really humid, or the terrain might be a little hillier than expected. And they'll fail to run or hike or maybe bike at the pace or for the distance that they intended to. And again, they will feel discouraged. That, or they'll force the pace, they'll force the distance, and then feel like their body just isn't made for cardio or that they hate cardio. Speed, pace, distance, calories, watts, resistance level. These are all measures of output. They reflect what your body produces in the workout. The shift I'm proposing is to make cardio simpler and possibly more sustainable by letting go of all of that data. Let go of output. Stop chasing those numbers. You might even completely ignore them. And instead focus on input, internal load, what the workout feels like, the effort, and what duration you will then sustain that effort. So effort and time. The shift is to forget about all the measures of output and instead focus on effort and time, because these are what actually drive the training effect. This also lines up with public health guidelines. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommend either about 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity cardio or 75 minutes per week of vigorous intensity cardio, which is really just a combination of how much time and how hard it feels. So why are we letting go of output? Well, here's the thing. If you like to target or track and target these numbers, these outcomes, go for it. There is nothing wrong with doing that. And for some people, these are not only maybe interesting to pay attention to, but they are also sometimes relevant to pay attention to. For example, output is important when you have specific performance goals, because performance is defined by output. So if you're training for a race and your goal is to complete a certain distance within a certain time or hold a certain pace or power output, in that context, tracking and targeting output, speed, pace, distance, power, can help you prepare for the exact demands that you're going to face in the event. But people with performance goals usually already have the buy-in when it comes to cardio. This video is actually for those of you who are just struggling to make it consistent, this form of exercise, right? When this is the case, if you're struggling with consistency, it's not only possible to completely ignore output and just focus on input, it's oftentimes the case that this switch, this flip, can kind of change our thinking about what we're doing and why in a really positive direction. And another thing I'll say for those of you who do have performance goals with cardio, I run marathons and I race. But even as a competitive recreational athlete, I only really focus on output during my race training blocks. And even early on in those training blocks, say if I'm taking 3 to 4 months to prepare for a marathon or a couple months to prepare for a 5K, in the early months or weeks of those training blocks, I'm actually also way more focused on input, way more focused on internal load of effort and time, and then only shift my focus to output as I get closer to race day. So if you're listening and you do have performance goals, I think there is a time and a place within our training to be more focused on output, but also, in my opinion, I think focusing on input is equally important and oftentimes the more appropriate aspect of training to focus on, especially when you're in between race training blocks. Maybe you're recovering from a previous race, or you're just getting your fitness back in preparation for a future race. Now, the reason output can be a trap for beginners specifically, or self-described cardio haters, is that it isn't always something we can control every day. Sleep, stress, terrain, weather, fitness status, recovery status from past workouts. Maybe you do both strength and cardio, so you're dealing with fatigue from both of those ways of working out. All of these variables impact what you will be able to produce in terms of output. So you don't just wake up every day able to do the same thing. And when you anchor your cardio workouts to output, it can start to feel really inconsistent, maybe discouraging for some of you. So it's kind of a little bit like grasping at some ideal self rather than anchoring yourself in the reality of where you are today and where you are right now. Like if we relate this to academics, this mismatch would be like aiming and expecting to score the exact same high grade on every exam, regardless of how much you slept, how stressed you feel, how difficult the test ends up being, or how hard you studied for it, and then just being really disappointed when you don't hit that intended high grade each time. Or it's like at work when you have a packed day with back-to-back meetings and constant interruptions, and you don't get through your full to-do list and you feel really disillusioned by it. Somehow we understand that in these other contexts of our lives, that the outcome of what we're able to produce will fluctuate even when the effort is there, and we are somehow okay with that. We're somehow able to give ourselves grace in these circumstances. And I think we really need to understand this better about cardio, and we need to extend that same grace into our cardio circumstances as well. And I think the way that we start to be able to do that is by focusing on input, focusing on what it feels like, and trying to aim effort to the intended amount of time we're going to engage in cardio exercise. And the way we do that, the way that we kind of let go of outcome and really just focus on what we're putting into it, is by focusing on effort and time. So let's look at a couple of scenarios that compare focusing on output and instead focusing on input and what that actually could mean. So for example, let's say you're going out for a run and you're planning to hold in your run a certain pace for a set number of miles. But the reality is you didn't sleep very well last night. Your legs feel heavy because you just recently strength trained, and every step feels pretty tough. The pace that you set for yourself actually feels harder than it should, and you aren't probably now going to complete the distance that you wanted to in the time that you actually have to run. So instead of adjusting, you just keep striving for this pace and this distance, you fall short, and then you feel like the whole run was a failure. And the tragedy of this, tragedy of this is that even though that run, the story you're telling yourself is that it was a failure, it actually was still a valuable input. It still contributed to your CDC minutes. It still likely furthered your fitness or prevented a loss of fitness. It probably positively contributed to your fitness and, by extension, possibly your health. But if all you're focused on is output, you might miss that. You might see the entire workout as a failure, and then that can become discouraging. That can cause you to stop engaging in cardio. It's very demotivating, right? And this is where focusing on output can really lead us astray, and it actually can become pretty destructive. Now, let's say you go out for this run, but instead of focusing on output, you let go of needing to run at a certain pace or for a certain distance, and you just focus on input. Instead, you plan to hold a moderate effort, and we'll talk about what that means, for 30 minutes. Now, despite not sleeping well, despite your legs feeling heavy, the effort you adjust so that it feels moderate because you're controlling this moment to moment so that it does. And you complete the full 30 minutes, which results in you having a successful workout that took you 30 minutes closer to completing your weekly cardio minutes for health and longevity. The output truly did not matter in this case because you gave yourself the stimulus and a change-making effort for a full 30 minutes. And if this was your intention, RPE 6 for 30 minutes, then you get to also walk away from that workout acknowledging that it was a success. You achieved what you set out to do. You can apply this approach to any mode: biking, rowing, elliptical, stairs, hiking. And in doing so, what you're doing is you're letting go of distance, you're letting go of pace, you're letting go of power, and you're really just going by input, what it feels like in the moment, and then how long you will sustain those momentary efforts or the entire workout duration for. Now, how do we measure this? effort and duration. Well, duration is pretty simple. We just need a watch. Effort can be measured using another simple tool called RPE, and I've talked about RPE in the most important number for building strength, as well as how to schedule strength and cardio for better recovery. RPE stands for rating of perceived exertion. On a scale of 1 to 10, you ask yourself, how hard did this feel? 1 is sitting on a couch, 10 is the hardest you've ever physically efforted in your life. A moderate effort sits somewhere between 4, 5, and 6. A vigorous effort, somewhere between 7 and 8. 9 and 10 is like very vigorous, very hard. Moderate means you can still have a conversation. You can't sing though, that's a little too easy. Vigorous means you could probably only get a few words out. And so you choose the target effort for the entire workout, or for intervals within the workout, you target it and then you sustain it for the intended amount of time. Using input means you're simply asking yourself, how hard does this feel? And for how long could I sustain this effort? And then you just stick to your plan. Now, at the end of these workouts, if you targeted the intensity and sustained it for the planned amount of time, you still produced an output. And you could still possibly observe that using whatever measuring devices you have. How far did I go? What pace did I average? For the rower, how many meters did I cover? For the bike, what were my watts? But you weren't targeting any of that. You were targeting effort, you were targeting time, and the output is just the result of those inputs. You can also collect these observations over time. You can start to write down the distance and the time and the pace and the power. And it's sometimes really interesting when you do that. So you're retrospectively writing it down, you targeted effort time, you write down your outputs afterwards. And what you might notice over time is if you're consistent, you consistently show up and do this work, that the performance is going to change, right? So that 30-minute workout at a 6 out of 10 intensity that used to have you covering 2 miles now has you covering 2.5 miles. On the bike, for example, that same 60-minute moderate effort that used to average you 120 watts now averages you 140. On a hike, that same 60-minute moderate effort that used to get you 2 miles up and 2 miles down on a given trail now gives you 2.1 miles up and 2.1 miles down because you're taking fewer breaks, you're fitter. The fitness gains in these cases were not achieved by forcing outputs in any given workout. They were driven entirely by input, by internal load, by paying attention to effort and time, by consistently showing up, by being intentional. Intentional. Let me pause here for a second because this is a really important word, because I think a lot of people approach cardio without much intention, without much of a plan, without a whole lot of thought about what the week is going to look like. And I think this gets at the heart of why people quit after just a couple of weeks. They don't have a plan. I think this is actually less common with strength training because with strength training, we tend to be more intentional. We kind of have to by nature with this form of exercise. It's not cyclical. It's not repetitive. A workout in strength training is typically comprised of a bunch of exercises and sets and rest times and a bunch of equipment. And so it's harder to just show up and wing it, make it up on the fly, right? You don't just spontaneously strength train. You usually come in with a plan, a rough plan maybe, but something like what exercises are you going to do? How many sets are you going to do? How many reps are you going to do? What weight are you going to use? So some structure is kind of required. With cardio, this is not the case. Like literally you could stand up right now and just start doing some cardio. It could be so spontaneous. And that's great. That's a really cool thing about cardio. But what happens is that people sometimes, I think, never really sit down and think about how to structure cardiovascular exercise. They just kind of randomly get up and do some cardio. Oh, I guess I'll go for a walk, or I guess I'll go out and run. And they don't know for how long they're going to walk. They don't know how hard it should feel. And they end up reverting to either maybe a punishing pace they can't sustain and then all of these negative thoughts and stories, or they revert to an intensity that really won't drive their fitness forward. That's a little too easy. So instead of just winging it, it might also be helpful to be intentional about how you're going to approach your cardio. And that actually is pretty simple now, right? You're deciding how many workouts you're going to do in a week, how long they're going to be, and what your target effort is. Instead of, I guess I'll walk today, or I guess I'll run today, and then effort is whatever it is, right? Let's actually make a decision ahead of time. What if instead you had a plan? What if instead you decided on how many workouts, the duration, the effort you would target in each of them, or the effort you would target in sections of the workout? Then really all you need to do is show up when the time comes and stick to the plan. You'll of course need to adjust Maybe some days the effort level has to come down a notch. Maybe other days it can come up a little bit. Maybe your weekly schedule doesn't quite work, so you need to tweak a few workouts here and there. But if you have a plan and you approach it simply enough, really letting go of output, focus on input, duration, and effort, sticking with your weekly workouts, showing up, putting in the time, is the discipline of consistency. And fitness relies first and foremost on that, on consistency, on really showing up and doing the thing. Effort within that consistency is the discipline of honesty, right? The more consistently and honestly you can engage in cardio, put in the time, and honestly target the intended effort. Consistently checking in with how are you actually doing, and does it need to be harder, does it need to be easier? The more progress you'll make with cardio, and the more you might even start to enjoy it. Have a plan, show up for it, be honest about how hard it feels, and stay on target with your intention. So the art of adjusting looks like continuously checking in with yourself and asking yourself, is my current level of effort sustainable for the amount of time I intend to hold it? Or, given the amount of time I plan to effort at this level, should my current effort go up or down? You can always adjust your effort up or down. You always have control over your effort because you can always check in with what it feels like. You can always give a number rating to what it feels like. And you don't need to use output to do this. In fact, you shouldn't. Effort is subjective, moment to moment. Output is objective. It's something that can be measured externally. So let go of that and instead ask yourself, my intention was for this to feel like a 6 out of 10. Is it a 6 out of 10? My intention was this to feel like an 8 out of 10. Is it an 8 out of 10? And adjust up or down accordingly. So to summarize, we've really simplified this. Your approach really consists of 3 things. Showing up, that's number 1. And that's probably the most important. You gotta show up, you gotta do this. You actually gotta show up week to week and do the work. Number 2, how long are these workouts going to be when you show up for them? Stick to the plan. Number 3, how hard are they supposed to feel? Some workouts will be the same level of effort from start to finish. Some you'll work in different intervals of different amounts of effort. Some low effort intervals mixed with some high effort intervals. In the next video, we're going to get into the details of this. We're going to talk about how much cardio you should do over the course of the week, and we'll go over sample workouts that might be a great starting point for your first couple weeks of training that you can do in any cardio mode you choose, whether it's stairs or hiking or elliptical or treadmill or rowing. We're going to look at how to play with different types of workouts, ones that are more moderate, more vigorous in nature, as well as how to play with intervals of high and low effort within those same workouts. To end, I want to share some very good news with you. When you're relatively new to cardio, almost everything works. You will see really big benefits, really the biggest benefits, from just starting to do it regularly. The key is to do it regularly. Consistency is queen. And hopefully this approach that I've explained to you in this video will help make cardio feel more doable, more accessible, and therefore will help you be more consistent with it. If you've ever had questions about Zone 2, which is a term that is thrown around on the internet a lot, lots of people have very polarizing opinions about it. It's really just an intensity level at which to engage in cardio. I recorded an entire podcast about Zone 2 called Much Ado About Zone 2, and you can check that out. Until next time, thanks for joining. Leave a comment below if you have any questions or ideas that came from watching this video.